So from grenades on planes and a shrinking JSE to militia threats across our border and ghost ships off our coastline, today's show is all about close calls, tough lessons, and the numbers that tell two very different stories. My friends, this is Daily Bagel, the only morning show that you need to kick off your Monday on the right note. Let's get into it. And kicking us off with current affairs, illegal military training camps linked to Lesotho are at the center of a growing cross-border security scare. Now, allegedly run by a group called the Militia, so Lesotho's police chief claims that the youth are being recruited for land reclamation militias, and that MP Seppo Apollo, who's been pushing to reclaim parts of South Africa for Lesotho, is already behind bars on sedition charges. For now, no evidence of these camps has been found, but our crime intelligence and the Hawks have stepped up joint operations with Lesotho. Now, officials warn this alleged insurgency poses a growing threat to both stability and peace in both countries. Now remember, this is all unfolding just as Lesotho scrambles to dodge a catastrophic 50% US tariff on its exports. With its $2 billion economy heavily reliant on denim factories shipping to the US, this tariff threat has already forced its government to declare a national disaster. So put together, Lesotho is facing both an economic gut punch and a potential security threat, a volatile mix for South Africa's neighbor and one that our own authorities can't afford to ignore. And next up, anyone who has flown out of a South African airport knows that those security checks can feel a lot more casual than anything else. Many a time bags glide through while those operators barely look up. Now, plenty of South Africans have their own stories, that forgotten pen knife in the jacket pockets or that multi-tool that somehow made it through. So maybe it's not shocking that a passenger managed to check in luggage containing not just one, but 2 training grenades and still have it loaded onto a flight to Ethiopia. Now, the devices were only picked up after landing in Addis Ababa, triggering a full-blown security scandal back home. So airports company South Africa, also known as ACSA, has blamed a third-party contractor for this lapse and has terminated their baggage screening contract. Now, remember that these grenades were harmless training aids, being training grenades, but the fact that they slipped through baggage screening is the real problem. So the upside here is that the ACSA says that it has now ramped up security with stricter checks and oversight. And honestly, I think we needed this kind of event to take place in order to increase security standards. And I'm just glad this happened with training grenades over something a lot more catastrophic. And on to our quickfire mentions. 2 South Africans have been arrested in Ukraine after traveling there for promised paramedic roles that turned out to be military training. Now, their families are working with South Africa's embassy for help. There are a lot more details involved in this case, and as these come out, we will likely cover this more in a detailed story. Nearly 2/3 of FlySafair's pilots, including union members, have returned to work as talks with Solidarity continue. Now, the airline is running a reduced but stable schedule while trying to resolve disputes over pay and roster changes. And FlySafair's parent company, Safair, has launched a legal challenge over a sanction related to its foreign ownership structure. Now, regulators say that the airline has until December to reduce its foreign shareholding or risk losing its domestic license. Honestly, not the best month for Safair. And on to our finance section. The JSE is quietly shrinking. I mean, the number of companies listed on Africa's biggest exchange has fallen to around 300, less than half of what it was in the 90s, with newer listings few and far between. So analysts like Alyssa Filyun from Merchant West Investments warns that this has left local portfolios heavily concentrated in just a handful of large stocks, with thin liquidity outside the top 40, making it harder for big fund managers to invest without distorting prices. Now, Norton Rose Fulbright has raised similar concerns, highlighting the decline in new listings and the rise in delistings on the JSE. And yet, on paper, the JSE has just surpassed 100,000 points on the All-Share Index, a milestone that masks how dependent the market has become on a narrow group of precious metal and tech heavyweights. Now, the headline looks great, but the underlying picture is of an exchange with fewer listings, greater concentration, and growing questions about its ability to attract new companies. And on to our quick fire mentions. Nestle shares slid to a 6-month low as the food giant launched a review of its underperforming vitamins business. Now, the company says that it may go on to sell some mainstream and value brands after weaker than expected sales growth in the first half. Some economists welcome June's 3% inflation print, saying it supports the case for a possible repo rate cut when the Reserve Bank meets this week. Now, as a result of this, bond yields eased and the rand strengthened on hopes of lower borrowing costs. And Ford has recalled more than 1,000 Ranger and Everest models with 3-liter V6 engines, citing a camshaft sprocket defect that could stall engines. This follows recent recalls of Puma and EcoSport models. And onto our sports section. The Proteas were agonizingly close in the final in Harare. 7 runs needed off the final over, Dewald Brevis on strike, and South Africa seemingly in control. The script felt perfect. Brevis had already smashed 31 of 16 with a couple sixes in the previous over and just one more clean strike that would have sealed it. Cricket has a funny way of flipping the script. You see, Brevis slightly mishit a shorter ball from Matt Henry, sending it hard to deep mid-wicket where Michael Bracewell pulled off one of these stunning juggling catches on the rope. 3 balls later, Linda fell to another brilliant catch, and suddenly the chase slipped away. The Proteas finished on 177 for 6, just 3 runs shy of a famous series win. So naturally, this is the kind of collapse that draws plenty of criticism. 7 of 6 in the final over should be a banker at this level. Fans will say it should have been managed better, but as Coach Conrad noted, this is part of the journey. For youngsters like Brevis and Pretorius, finals like these are where lessons stick and where future wins are forged. And on to our quick fire mentions. The Currie Cup returned with 2 thumping results. The Lions crushed the Sharks 46-5 at Ellis Park, while the Bulls dominated Western Province 48-23 in Cape Town, scoring 6 tries to claim an emphatic derby win. Taddy Pogacar sealed his 4th Tour de France title after holding off Jonas Vingegaard on the final weekend. Vingegaard finished 2nd overall, just unable to match Pogacar's dominance across the mountain stages and the time trials. And Liv Golf has confirmed its first ever South African event at Johannesburg's Steyn City next March. Local fans will get to see Stingers GC, Louis Oosthuizen, Dean Burmester, Charles Schwartzel, and Brandon Grace competing on home soil. And before we continue, here is your bagel bite of the day. The question is, which is South Africa's oldest wine estate? Is it A, Groot Constantia, B, Speer, or C, Constantia Glen? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. And on to our wildcard section. Centuries ago, sailors rounding the Cape of Good Hope used to whisper about a ship that they never wanted to see. They called it the Flying Dutchman, a ghostly galleon cursed to sail the seas forever. So the legendary story goes that in the 1600s, a Dutch captain named Hendrik van der Decken was caught in a brutal storm at the Cape. And rather than turn back, he swore that he'd round the Cape, even if it took him until Judgment Day. Big mistake. For his arrogance, he and his crew were doomed to an eternity at sea, never able to make port. So over the centuries, sailors swore that they saw the phantom ship glowing in the distance, its sails in tatters crewed by the damned. Even future King George V logged a sighting in 1881. So seeing the Flying Dutchman was considered a death omen. If you spotted her, disaster was close behind. And with the Cape once known as the Cape of Storms, it's not hard to see why this ghost story refused to die. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is Groot Constantia, founded in 1685 by Simon van der Stel. It's not just South Africa's oldest wine estate, but also a national monument, famous for the sweet wines that were once exported to European royalty. And my friends, that's it for today's show. The show might be finished, but this week is just starting. So let's get rocking and rolling. Have a cracker start to your week, and I'll see you guys all same time tomorrow. Cheers.